Welcome to the Alarpa Podcast, the home for cultural chit-chat in and outside Madrid. People will talk. Welcome to the Alarpa Podcast. Maria, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Despite the strange intonation of that question, I'm very happy to hear that. So you have had a very busy weekend discussing deep economic and philosophical and political things. More of that in part two. Bumper weekend. Life-changing weekend in Madrid, no? Over the Huernes, the Thursday-Friday period. We were en route to Plaza España area, Templo de Bod, to do 360 filming. If you follow us on veer.tv, you will find our 360 videos there. And we were there listening to the radio as it was all unfolding. And then Friday, it happened. So you probably know what we're talking about. But you can fill us in a little bit more, Dr. Political Scientist Mary.
We're talking about the vote of no confidence.
Exactly.
Took place in the Congress, in the Spanish Congress, and which was successful, which meant that the conservative government went out.
And for the first time in Spanish history, no?
That's true. Well, yes, in the history of democracy.
Yeah.
After the dictatorship.
Okay, very good. On a Tuesday.
Sorry. But yes, in the last 40 years.
40 years. Okay, great. So we will be talking about that in part two. Great reaction to our previous episode, especially the stuff about the Islamic culture. So more of that in part two as well, especially about the Moroccan bid for the World Cup, because we're so cruelly cut short in the last podcast. You have time to talk about it today, don't you?
Plenty.
Fantastic. What else? Oh yes, and also I was very naughty. I went to an exhibition without you, but I will go with you for the second time in Tabacalera and Lavapiés, talking about anthropological things. Isabel Munoz. Can you say that better?
No, that's bottom.
Nice one. Talking about prisoners, immigrants, and things of very compelling stories. And you'll, like me, you'll experience it twice. You'll experience it through this podcast, and we will definitely go together this week. You can experience it firsthand as well. So that'll be nice, won't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, anything else you want to add in this part one? Well, actually, where are we? We're sitting outside.
Yeah, we're outside Retiro because we're going to the book fair as every year since
last year.
El Arpa began.
Exactly. 4 years, 5 years?
Well, it depends on whose calendar.
El Arpa fills me with so much joy, I always like to think it's longer. For the last 20 years of El Arpa's history, we'll be going to the book fair. So
yes.
We'll be going in there, and we'll be telling you a little bit about it, of course, as we go on. So cue the musical interlude, and let's roll into Head First, Part 2. Part 2 of the show. Here we are. So where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about the weekend that was?
Can do.
Okay, so we drift in then after that into the Islamic culture. Well, very tenuous link to it via the World Cup bid of 2026 and Morocco, and then we can finish with a little bit of anthropological stuff and our little Isabel. So take it away.
Okay, so what do you want to know?
Well, I was teaching about fake news today. So, how to read and write a proper news story. So, obviously, you have the 5 W's. No, a classic journalistic code. The who's, the where's, the why's, the what's, and the something else. So, who are the main protagonists in this saga?
Okay, so, the main protagonists are the Conservative Party.
PP.
Yes.
Yeah, Partido Popular.
Yes.
Popular Party.
They have...
not so popular now.
Not so popular, no? Basically, they originated from another party that was kind of partially uh, an air of the dictatorship, let's say.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people that were ministers during at the end of the dictatorship went into that party and consequently into this party.
How far down the right spectrum would you put them? Are they centre right? Are they far right?
Like, of course, they started as far right, and then they've been kind of like moving towards the center. Well, I don't know. Mm, it's kind of like a softer right to compared to like 40 years ago, but still right nonetheless. It just depends on like who you ask. Some people will tell you they're fascist. Some people have found a new party to occupy that space.
Um, they've been credited with keeping the farther right elements in check. So Pepe have brooked a lot of criticism, Rajoy in particular, and a lot of it justified. On this particular point, before we delve into the specific situation of last week, have you seen their place in the Spanish political landscape like that? Have you seen them performing this role of well, they're Pepe, but they've also been keeping these kind of wilder, more extreme elements under a little bit of control? Or do you think that's a justification that kind of paints Pepe in too positive a light?
Well, I would probably say that they used to. With Aznar and stuff, I would say they were like with the previous conservative president. In the early 2000s, 2000, I think they were like more.
Oh wait, there's a police car driving past. We're talking about politics. They might arrest us.
They were more like reactionary back then.
Okay.
But then in recent years, I think they were slightly more diluted. Of course, like for left wing supporters, they're still conservative, but I would say that they were taking care of other things, as we know now. To
You're alluding to corruption.
Yeah, they were too busy, kind of like yeah. I don't think they focus so much on like the social things. I think that the social elements that is annoying, or well, annoys me. Of course, doesn't annoy everybody, but it does annoy a lot of people. It's more the disregard than anything else. You know what I mean? I don't think like they are so focused anymore on like kind of like keeping this moral ground and this attachment that they had in the past. But I think recently it was more kind of like the maintaining the privilege of like, I would say, of like the upper class and kind of like just leaving the working class. Things like the evictions and
Yeah.
those sort of things. And also, of course, most importantly, freedom of speech, which I think has seen uh, dramatic hate in the past few years
Well, we've
in Spain.
we've done an entire podcast about this, and we can talk about it again now. You've just brought it up, so that is true. Freedom of speech has been rolled back incredibly in this country. Every week, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but quite frequently, you will hear stories of people or the government and the police kind of stepping in and encroaching more on the concept of freedom of speech. The most recent example of this in Spain, of course, is of the rapero,
Yeah.
the rapper who sang about shooting the Guardia Civil. Now,
Yeah.
you know, is that nice? Is that a nice thing to rap about? Well, it's a very tricky situation because you had NWA singing "fuck the police," and and yes, I can see you air rapping that right now. This is the moment I always regret. It's not a video podcast.
Yes, because all I know I learned from you.
Well, I saw the movie, so I would recommend that. But well, it's all about intent and context. So someone asked Ice Cube about that song, like, why are you singing about killing the police? He's like, well, it's a. I'm not actually threatening anybody. It's an artwork. It's more cops driving past there. It's a criticism of the police and how they treat certain communities, and it's a criticism of a regime rather than a specific threat against anybody. So it's a form of expression, and most people went, okay, fair enough. Now I don't know enough about this guy to comment about his lyrics and things. This is about freedom of speech. Like probably is an idiot, maybe this rapper, because if he's rapping about those things, but it's his right to be an idiot, and it's our right to ignore him. Um, and I don't think we have the moral authority to step in and say you can't rap about that, because that puts a protection and buffer zone around a certain section of society that shouldn't be above criticism. Because if when they do become above criticism, that's when more abuses happen. Because abuses happen whenever anybody has power. So even in a perfect, relatively good society, you're going to have the police kind of taking the piss a little bit, or politicians taking the piss a little bit. But when you have these like little protections happening and people stepping in over fundamental kind of lines in the sand, like what you're allowed to say or even think, those abuses become amplified, and people, like you're mentioning there about Pepe, they just became more brazen, really, about keeping the status quo. I didn't really care about hiding it anymore, and that's what's kind of like you can kind of see in other parts as well. So yeah, so you just mentioned with freedom of speech. That's just a very recent example in Spain about that happening. So
Yes, no, I completely agree. I mean, it's absurd as well because it's going backwards. It's not even like keeping like the status quo at all. It's kind of like because if you think about history, people like one of the people that he criticizes the most is the king and the monarchy as an institution. It's always been criticized, and there's a sample of satire throughout history in Spain. And even right after the dictatorship, when there was still a very conservative atmosphere in Spain, um, the jokes, if you look at the jokes now that they made about everybody, politicians, about the king, they were quite ruthless, and they were perfectly accepted as what they were.
yeah,
And you know, even like for example with rap, it's in the essence of the genre to be. I mean, it is about like denouncing. So it would be absurd to well, you have to get rid of the entire of that entire like type of music because that's the point. And then if people, I mean, yes, like there's a difference between like criticizing and threatening people, but I think it's quite clear what that difference is, you know.
exactly. But even, again, this is tricky as well. But you have to allow space in the creative imagination to kind of go to places like that as well and tell stories. If you listen to Nick Cave, like a lot of his stories, like he has a whole album called Murder Ballads, and again, okay, he's not talking about anybody specific in those songs, but like he does go to dark places, and
Mm.
and I think as a society we should be able to not indulge but kind of explore those elements as well, because it can raise a conversation about different things, and it can and provoke a conversation about whatever that concept is connected to the activity that you're
Yeah.
performing, or what you're rapping or singing about, for example. So, but also as well, which is always the worst thing, is you see this internationally, not just in Spain, perhaps more so internationally than in Spain, but you have this feeling of victimhood with the right wing, like their freedom of speech is being trampled upon, which is complete rubbish, and like they're the victim. And cynically, like they know that's not the case, but they're going to employ this language of victimhood. And but in reality, they have all the power, they hold all the aces. And in Spain, for example, if you're on the left wing, I think it's a lot more difficult to organize a protest. But if some guy gets killed who's like a fascist, you can have a parade down the city center, not the city center, but like a main street, like near Goya and everything, which I have seen before Christmas, I think it was. And it just was, yeah, I assume it was actually relatively easy for them to organize that. So like so when they like put limits, it's never indiscriminate. It's always like targeted against certain groups and not evenly distributed. I think it's a flawed concept anyway. I don't think it's right to limit anybody's freedom of speech, even if some of their ideas are against yours. But it's never even done in an equal way. It's always done against a certain group in society. So, and that's what I've witnessed here, and that's something that happens internationally as well. Like Tommy Robinson from the EDL, his crowd, they're talking about freedom of speech now. He's getting I think 3 months in prison for contempt of court for talking about a high profile case. But people like him are talking a lot about like freedom of speech issues as well. They're all right wing EDL. If you want to check them out, they're all over YouTube. But they're not victims of like a lack of freedom of speech. So anyway, that's another topic for another day. Pepe, though, you're right. They have become very brazen and very corrupt, and specifically the corruption. That's why they're out in their asses this time, and a new government. Why? Why is the corruption so bad in this case? What was the catalyst?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say it's in this case. It's like
Well,
the thing
corruption,
is
yeah,
like it's been like a continuous thing, but
institutional.
exactly. I mean, that's the thing. It's the first time that a judge rules that the party has been consistently using the institutions for their own uh, lucrative activities. So like um, basically, well, just fixing contracts and fixing public contracts with their own companies, this sort of thing. I mean,
Yeah,
but they basically, it's been proven that because there's always like this thing that they say, oh, it's just a few bad apples and stuff. But then what this sentence has like proved for the first time is that it was kind of like an institutionalized thing,
yeah,
and like a full network. And I think the reason why nothing has happened so far is because there were so many people that got benefited by it, because obviously all these networks are um, they're all like established within entrepreneurs here and owners of big companies and not such big companies, and they were all benefiting from it. So I think when you're in the capital, you can see how those networks, and especially like for us that we move, around a lot of companies and stuff like that, then you start like seeing how those circles kind of close and how certain people like all know each other, and it's like favor for favor. And it's very, I don't know, I was like a couple of years ago I was already noticing this. The more I contact I had with sort of like circles of power in an entrepreneurial context, the more I realized that uh, they were like completely complicit with politicians in like creating like this big structure where basically scratch my back, even scratch yours. I'm not saying it's not like that elsewhere, uh, but this was like all done in an illegal way, and it was systematic.
yeah. And like he could have left or saved the party by sacrificing himself, but he clung on to his position, and the whole thing has gone down now because of his refusal to.
But that's such a like typical thing of I think this is one of the reasons why for me it was like such a desperate. I was getting so desperate recently because like it got to a point where it really felt in this country like there was complete impunity, so nothing had consequences, because this issue all came up. I think I was still in the UK even, so it was like over 5 years ago this issue
Yeah,
came up, where they found all the papers stating that all the members were, or many of the members of the executive were getting like extra payments
yeah,
and extra salaries just for the sake of it, and from public money. And it's taken like this far for anything to happen, because there is no such a thing here as like political responsibility unless a judge says.
which
And
is.
even so, there's still a lot of like issues with it, and a lot of.
Well, there wasn't an official judge sentence or judgment, and that it was truly landmark because for a long time Pepe were like always like on the side of the courts because the courts generally were favoring them, and this is the one instance where they
Yes.
went against the Pepe, and they're like, well, it's only your opinion, but
Yes, exactly.
but
That
a
was
judge's
hilarious.
opinion like has to be final, otherwise what's the point of a judge? And you
Hmm.
see it also as well in other countries, this situation where a politician can just, the facts could be just right there, and somebody could say something contradictory to it, and it's obviously bullshit, but some people go along with it. But in here, at least, finally, something so egregious and something so obviously wrong, no matter what they were saying, people are like, we're not buying it, and that hasn't been happening in a lot of places for a while. So this was like, it's a staggering victory, for the concept of justice. I know that sounds very big, but like in a lot of countries that hasn't been happening. So people actually were saying we're not buying this bullshit. Now you could be cynical as well and say, well, Pedro Sanchez is like looking for a way back in power, and of course he is. But I think it was fundamental that, like you said, if it was so obvious and so brazen, there had to be a consequence and a penalty for that, and that was to getting kicked out of the government.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
only happy that this happened through justice, because otherwise I'm convinced it wouldn't have happened. That's my only regret, that it wouldn't have happened through the people,
Yeah.
because we already had elections, and then nothing happened, and then people even, there's no like a massive outcry, because there's no such a thing here as, I can understand that somebody's done like something wrong,
Well.
unless because it's my party. If
Yeah.
it's my party, then I'll always justify them.
Yeah,
That's
but
the frustrating
but
thing.
it's like here it's I heard a story. Well, I heard like last Wednesday that Carmena is offering a job scheme for immigrants in the LFPS. Which is a wonderful thing. But you'll find probably more people complaining about that in Carmena than they are complaining about Pepe and
Sure.
very obvious corruption. Now, the political victory for this is a little bit more measured because Pedro Sanchez isn't exactly perhaps the most competent politician. He is a minority in the Senate, right?
Well, no.
Yeah.
He's the second party. He's the second party overall. In the Senate, he's third because Ciudadanos has.
Yeah. But he's 85 seats. Where?
He's got 82 seats in
Yeah.
Congress.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Okay. It's not.
It's not ideal.
It's not. He's in minority, but
Yeah.
for the purposes of like governing, he needs the support of too many people that might not necessarily agree with him. Yes.
Well, it's going to fall apart sooner or later. So that, like, the whole idea of this as well was to avoid and stave off elections, but the elections are coming, no?
The elections have to happen,
Yeah.
like sooner or later. I mean, this is the idea, but the difference is that that now is like an indefinite period, which could be like 6 months to 2 years.
Okay. Okay, so that's hopefully 2 years, no? Because there's been a period of lots of elections here in Madrid and in Spain as well. So, well, big news. First time in the history of democratic Spain on a Tuesday at 4 p.m. that government has fallen through the vote of no confidence. So, speaking from Madrid, our political correspondent, Maria, outside the courthouse / Senate / government buildings. So back to studio. So, anything else you want to say about that?
No.
No. Okay, so let's just talk about Isabel.
Okay, there's no need to pull that smug smile. I was just waiting for Morocco, that was all.
I was thinking of doing a whole thing at the end of like, oh, let's talk about Morocco. Actually, no, we can't.
What do you mean? No, of course.
Well, the Morocco bit. So, do we have time?
What do you mean? Do we have time? Well, we have 4 minutes.
4 minutes.
But we have to put more money, so it's okay.
Okay, it's fine. Okay, we have to put more money in the podcast meter. I'm not sure if you're familiar with podcast microphones. So, if you're really poor like we are, you gotta put spare change in it to keep it going.
Give us some money.
Patreon.com, Elaborate Media. So Isabel Munoz, she's not there, but her stuff is there in the Tabacalera in Lava PS, and it is truly amazing. So you really wanted to go there. Why did you really want to go there? We will go there this week, don't worry, I promise.
Yeah.
But why did you want to go there?
Well, no, I just saw some photos and they look good, and I thought the concept was interesting too. I just read like a small it wasn't even a review, it's just a little reference to it, like 3-4 lines.
Yeah.
And the photos, and then I thought, oh, this is something we would really like.
We would. That's
that
why
we could go to together.
That's why I went there as an advanced party scouting.
Oh, yes.
And then we'll go back because we know it's good now, it's confirmed. But no, it reminded me of another exhibition that we did go to together, which is the Joseph Kudelka.
Did it?
It did. Did it remind you of that as well?
Well, no, because I haven't seen it, have I?
Yeah, but maybe from the pictures and the ambience, you're like...
No, well, maybe.
Again, we've done a podcast on that, so you can check it out on the podcast app. So, yeah, basically Kudelka was a guy who photographed people who were outside society, people on the edges or the extremes. That could be because they're immigrants, or because they're maybe disabled, or maybe because they're just naturally loners, for example. And this is what Isabel is doing as well. She is photographing people kind of on the fringes of society, whether because they're women, whether because they're prisoners, or maybe because they're immigrants trying to get into a country, for example. So there's real echoes of Kudelka and that, and photographed really, really well. So there's 2 documentaries there. One is about a train, an illegal train that runs from Mexico to America. and people get on that train to get in. Well, they
La
could.
de Beast?
That's the beast, yeah. So you could have like 7 wagons, maybe hundreds of people. Terrible conditions because like basically the gangs realize there's a quick buck to be made from running immigrants into another country. So unfortunately, a lot of people get beaten. A lot of women are at a risk of rape as well. So, um, so again, it's just, uh, people going through so much just to have a chance of a better life in another country, for example, and how it's been taken advantage of by criminal gangs. So she spends some time on the train and she kind of photographs the people and talks to them and gets snippets of their conversation. Two men are talking about how it's very dehumanizing to be on the train and you lose all sense of self. And she even explains, well, she doesn't explain, but it is explained through narration and text and kind of other the people who are on the train, their input, but how like the gang sends kind of scouts throughout the wagons or the carriages of the train, and they can see who has money, who has a phone, who's making phone calls to their family in America, and that these are the people that get targeted and get robbed or beaten or like somehow money can be extracted from them because they have some kind of leverage over them. That leverage being information about how much money they have or who they know on the other side of the border, for example. So again, it's just um, very sad situations, So very relevant as well because you have a lot of these immigrants being demonized in the current political climate. Also, she photographs prisoners who have a lot of tattoos, and they're gang members who've killed a lot of people, so they're like in an ultra secure prison, especially for it was like a specially built prison. And she said like I started off photographing them I would hate because they've ruined so many lives, but then I saw in their own way they were victims, and it's quite interesting as well because like at that stage like their prison tattoos weren't necessarily the traditional gang tattoos showing affiliation or how many people they killed, but because they're so far out of society, I think they were basically covering their whole face and their whole body with just images, whatever they found was interesting. So it could be guns or women or whatever else, But so it wasn't the fact that they were representing some kind of gang, but because they were so on the edge of society and probably there's no way back. They were all in. So it's like, well, might as well just cover myself with tattoos because nobody's going to accept me back into normal society anyway. So it's interesting to see that mental process. And also, speaking of even the beast, um, it just reminds me as well, like, there's a documentary about, well, it's not really connected, but just there's some people who live the hobo life in America. They ride the rails as a way of life, So it's kind of two contrasting ways of using the rails either side of the border. And while this was there, you must have seen some of the stuff she interviewed people in Africa, people who like kind of paint all over their bodies as well. How they did tribal kind of markings. You didn't see that, no? That's there as well.
No, I only saw two photos.
Really, yeah. Okay. And also, Sufism as well. So you remember when we went to that exhibition?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and lots of people. I didn't know this element of Sufism because a lot of people hurting themselves and putting knives in their skulls and like getting their body elevated by hooks and putting like blades through their mouth and everything because it was like a way to, well, as they say in the text in Spanish, sublimation. So Freud used that word a lot as well, which is like to change state. So kind of like provoke this intense physical pain and feeling, and that would release you or bring you into this kind of maybe elevated spiritual plane, this kind of area of the soul, once the pain of the physical had peaked. So it's very interesting, very shocking photographs to look at, but it's interesting because I think I mentioned before Frankie Boyle, the Scottish comedian, is like saying how he thinks life is just a whole sequence of the soul trying to escape the body, and this is kind of like expressing that in a way because it's a way of like desecrating the body or like marking the body to kind of leave it behind, even momentarily and everything as well. So they also had like the dervish dancers as well, where they're going around in a circle where they can kind of like elevate themselves. So it's kind of looking at different ways people kind of get out of themselves as well. I guess it's if you had to characterize maybe a common theme, there's different themes in it, but maybe skin was one of them because you had the tattoos of the art of the prisoners and the Sufism and how people kind of like changed and marked and pierced their skin, and as a reflection of who they were and maybe where they wanted to go as well. So yeah, I don't know, because like there's a lot to take in there. I'd recommend going there. So,
Do you know?
yeah, I would. Yeah, which we will go as well. So I don't know. Did that make sense? Any of that?
No, that made a lot of sense and it sounded really interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty
Thank
cool.
you very much
Yeah,
for not going with me, but telling me about it.
we'll go on
And the
Thursday.
listeners.
So Morocco.
Yes.
Oh, I think we're out of time. So.
So now this time don't blame me.
Well, you're getting itchy about going to this book fair, so we better
No,
go.
I'm not getting any job. I'm just feeling like we're in Morocco because we're roasting to death.
Okay, well, look, I really want to talk about Morocco, but I guess okay.
Like,
Since you're so hot, we'll
don't
go.
blame me.
No, you're complaining about the temperature, so because you're so hot.
Yeah, but I can just open the window. How?
Okay, we'll get out here and we'll walk through the park, and there'll be a special outdoor section on Morocco and the
Okay.
World Cup 2026. Okay,
Good.
so we'll be back momentarily. Here we are in the ambient, awesome and really cool Feria del Libro. We've seen a live radio broadcast from what station?
RN is a national radio.
Saw a sign for a book signing that was happening today, and also just a plethora of bookstalls, kiosks, and books as well. We're going to come back on Thursday, give it a better sconce, but lots of action, lively things, no?
Yes, lots of things going on as usual.
Okay, so let's book that date in our diary to come back.
Let's. And now let's talk about more.
We'll have to be patient. Okay, very good. So
Let's talk
Morocco.
about more.
Yeah,
Coco.
the World Cup is in 11 days, I think.
Don't talk like you don't know when it is.
I saw it because Spain drew 1-1 with Switzerland yesterday, and the headline today in the paper in El País was like Spain draw with Switzerland 11 days before the Mundial. So yeah, I think it's 11 days. And the announcement of who gets the 2026 World Cup happens the day before the tournament.
yeah?
So that's I think I'm pretty sure it says 10 days away. Now the
Okay.
last time it was a bit weird because they did two countries in one go, which was Russia and Qatar. Normally they don't do that; they just do the announcement of the next tournament. But because Qatar is after Russia, they're doing it for 2026, which of course is a few years away, and it's going to it could be either in a joint bid called the United Bid, so that'd be in North America and Mexico, so Canada, United States, and Mexico, or in Morocco. I've written an article
Hey.
putting forth. Oh, you just did cause havoc with the dials there, audio levels
See that?
with that screeching. Yeah,
Sorry.
don't worry about it.
I'll edit it out.
Now there's wind, so I'm editing anyway, so I'll leave it in just for the hell of it. Anywho,
Just keep quiet.
well, you've read the article.
Sorry, I'm not allowed to speak.
You're allowed to speak. Of course you are.
I've read the article, of course. It's
Yeah.
brilliant, as usual.
Thank you very much. So that's Box to Box Football is going to be. You can pre-order it now on boxtoboxfootball.com or .co.uk. Yeah, it's .co.uk. I don't know. I'm the writer. I don't have to know these things. Yeah. So basically, instead of like beating around the bush, I think that they should get the bid because first of all, there are several reasons why. I think FIFA are trying to screw them over in not getting the bid because suddenly FIFA are like saying, you have to have a host city of a certain size with a certain population, and the distance between a host city and an airport cannot be like longer than 90 minutes. I think in the case of Morocco, the kind of situation is between Casablanca and one airport, it's like 91 minutes. And that extra 60 seconds could literally be like the red flag, the red mark that FIFA say, okay, that's too far, even though it's like 60 seconds extra. And the whole city thing, like all these changes happened back in March, or these requests happened back in March, like 48 hours before the submission for the final bids were being made. So obviously United Bid had theirs prepared. Morocco had to kind of scurry around and kind of adapt to these new regulations. And I kind of make the case in my article that there's never an issue in Brazil when, Brazil built far more in its stadiums than were necessary, more than the expected number. They built like 3 or 4 more. Also built one in the middle of the rainforest, which obviously had no it was also a part of the country that had no football, so genuine footballing cities were ignored. So it's not like Brazil, like every part of Brazil loves football.
Right.
Only certain parts do. Like I mean, a lot of places do, but not every part. So genuine football cities were ignored. You had this kind of white elephant stadium in the rainforest, and obviously after the World Cup, that was not going to do anything. We've had problems as well in South Korea with South Africa as well, with these stadiums not being used for anything after the World Cup. Now, Morocco's way to get around that is to have like collapsible stadiums in the sense of like having the size reduced after the tournament, which is actually very workable and very scalable because there's nothing in the FIFA plan that says, okay, this is like the building criteria and there's no after tournament care where it's like, okay, so what's going to happen to this stadium now? FIFA just want the stadium built. They don't care how it's done. But they so the fact that Morocco is actually trying to work around this obvious issue of white elephant stadiums, I think is a big plus point to their side. And I think they didn't care about population sizes for cities before. They didn't care about distances between host cities and airports before. So because a lot of these places were like inaccessible, especially in Brazil. So I think this is definitely a stumbling block designed to get Morocco out of the bid because they want the United bid to win because they'll get a huge bonus to the tune of 300 million and even more millions if it's held specifically in the United States of America, but also like in Canada and Mexico as well. So for purely footballing reasons as well, Morocco is more of a football tradition, and yeah, obviously North America does as well, and they deserve to have a World Cup sometime. But I think Africa as a continent deserves a footballing tournament. And also, I think I kind of argue as well the point, like because of the controversy around Russia and Qatar, FIFA now mandated that if you're bidding for the World Cup, you have to produce an independent human rights report. The United bid have submitted theirs, but Morocco haven't. I kind of look at the reasons why the negative points of Morocco in terms of their human rights. So if you are homosexual, it's a difficult country to live in, and also as well if you're like a journalist and free speech is also a concept that's under threat in Morocco as well. So I don't try to whitewash those at all. For example, of course I don't. I'm just saying in the article that FIFA probably, as an institution, could probably have more leverage over a country like Morocco for two reasons. One, it's a smaller country. It's not a major state that's used to ignoring international organizations. And in addition, Morocco, like the whole premise of their bid is like Europe meets Africa. So, and also they want to be more politically tied and economically tied to the European Union. And a lot of Moroccans feel, I think a lot of, they identify a lot with Spain, maybe France as well, but basically they want to be quasi-European, and because you have this political incentive for Morocco, I think it would be a lot easier to say, look, these are issues that have to be resolved, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I think there'd be more potential to improve social situations for journalists and homosexuals and other kind of marginalized kind of people in the country. While you look at United States of America, okay, so you have political interference from President Trump. He's basically threatening countries to not vote against America. Liberia is one African country that's kind of broken rank and says it's going to support the United States because there's a lot of Liberians in America, so maybe they're worried about what's going to happen to them. Also, as well, you have four dependent territories that are in the United States, more or less. So like Puerto Rico be one, and they still have voting rights even though they shouldn't because it's connected obviously to the United bid and would vote against the Morocco bid. So for a variety of reasons, it's not really a level playing field for human rights abuses. Both countries have their issues, obviously, but I think in South,
Qatar and Russia.
well, of course, yeah. But I think FIFA could do more good in a place like Morocco, and also for footballing reasons, I think it's more of a more footballing has a bigger footballing culture, and I think it deserves a shot at having a World Cup, more so now than the United States in particular, but also the kind of entire North American bid because what's happening in underage football at grassroots level in America is that Latinos or teams that have Latinos have been threatened by people who feel emboldened by this kind of anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican, anti-Latino rhetoric, and I think it would be absurd as well to give a World Cup that is so international in its roots and its kind of manifestation and its whole ethos to a country that has like obviously full of great people, but it's been run by a guy now who a lot of people are against, who are American, of course, but by a guy who's so anti-international and so contemptuous of the rights of people in his own country who aren't originally from there. So that goes against the spirit of the
the World Cup, and I think even though it's in 2026, the bid would be won now. And I think it would be the wrong legacy or the wrong present to give a regime that has this kind of bias against other nationalities. So that's kind of like why I think Morocco should get the 2026 bid. It's going to be a close run thing. Who knows what's going to happen? But in 10 days or so, we're going to find out who gets the bid. Fingers crossed it's going to be Morocco, but probably it's going to be United States, because if FIFA get a windfall, that means other like national associations are going to get the benefit of that as well. So when it comes to FIFA, money talks, and not football. So I end my article by talking about Dadaism, because FIFA is a Swiss organisation. Dadaism is a movement that also was founded in Switzerland, and they wanted to meet the absurdity of war the horror of war with absurdity, because the argument was, how could there be society if there's war of such a industrial, mechanical dimension? Because you'd gas attacks and tanks and aerial bombardments happening during World War One, and it was a horror on an unprecedented scale until the Second World War. So their rebellion against that was doing very absurd and strange things. And I end the article by saying, well, now it's strangeness is the new norm, and we have to react to that with common sense. And that's why, for a footballing tournament, make a footballing decision and give the World Cup to Morocco. So who knows? Let's see what happens.
Let's see what happens.
Only one thing's for certain: Ireland's not playing because they haven't qualified.
Oh.
I know. Spain are playing.
Well, yeah, but we'll only last a round or two.
Spain have a good team.
We'll see.
This is not a footballing podcast, though we did spend like last 10 minutes talking about football.
Well, human rights as well, and culture, so.
And Dadaism.
Mm-hmm.
So, there, you can probably hear some microphone stuff in the background. Let's dive back into this while we still have time. And we'll be talking to you next week. And thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for part
3.
So, you like my radio voice? It's going to be very stressful talking like this all the time.
Well, you'll have to make an effort. Makes what you say sound very interesting.
As we mentioned in the previous podcast, I have provided a voice for Brugal.
There we go. Do they pay you every time like you mention the name?
They haven't paid me full stop. Well, I've gotten a little bit, yeah, for that little Bunsen burner money. And I haven't still seen the final product, so I hope it's still being released. So that is it. We have talked about so much culture, politics, and the wonderful book fair thingy in the park. So if you're in Madrid, I recommend going to the Parque de Retiro. How long is this running for? Is it a week?
No, it's until, I believe it's the first week in July.
Okay, and if you hurry, you just might catch another changing of government.
Yes, anything can happen
in Madrid.
In this country.
So, to develop your radio voice, I'm going to let you plug our websites.
So you can find us on elarfamilia.com is our website. I'm just copying you.
Okay.
Find us on Patreon. Find us on @elarfa1 is our Twitter handle.
elarfa1 is our Twitter handle. elarfamilia is our Instagram and our YouTube at veer.tv.
See, you doing better.
You've heard me do it plenty of times. But okay, well, you find us on Instagram, Facebook, not Facebook. Instagram, Twitter.
Don't find us on Facebook.
YouTube and
Yet.
Patreon. Elarfa Media is our handle for lots of those. And if you want to donate to us a cup of coffee per month, feel free to do so. So that's it. Bye bye. Arrivederci, baby. Hasta luego. See you on the flip side. And
Bye.
nice one. The Elarpa Podcast, the home for cultural chit-chat in and outside Madrid. People will talk.